Thank you, Rich, and thank you to your speakers. So to add to this series of wicked problems, we're going to add time pressure, ticking clocks. That's the title of the next session. And well, SDGs are not a new concept. They've been around for some time, but it is time to move a gear up and to look at how research and innovation can help achieve those SDGs. And to talk about that topic, it is my pleasure to hand over to my colleague Simon Pickard, the director of the network. Simon, over to you.
Hello. Okay, is this on? Yeah, everybody hears me? Fantastic. So, good afternoon. A pleasure to have you here with us. We can't talk about sustainability without talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. In case anyone's forgotten, we're pretty much halfway through a 15-year agenda, right? The first ever global framework for sustainable development, signed by over 190 countries, and with some very ambitious targets to be attained by 2030. Now, anybody who cares about the SDGs may occasionally read the progress reports published by the United Nations. Last year's wasn't good, quote unquote. Cascading and interlinked crises are putting the 2030 agenda in grave danger. And this is not just COVID, this is global conflict, this is food shortages, it's other health-related issues. So in an increasingly polarized world, what future for the SDGs? We're falling behind, we need to get back on track, and so the purpose of this session is to ask what science, technology, and innovation can contribute to getting us back on track. So with that, looking forward to an excellent panel discussion. I'm going to invite first the three speakers who are in the room to come and join me on stage. We have a very long set of titles for the most part, but first, Takao Kuramochi, who is the Deputy Senior Director General for the Japan Science and Technology Agency. Second, Márcia Balisciano, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer and Global Head of Corporate Responsibility with the RELX Group. Linda Doyle, the Provost of Trinity College, Dublin. And joining us live from New York on behalf of the UN, Lila Karbassi, who until recently was Chief of Programs at the UN Global Compact, but is now the Chair of the Executive Board for the Science-Based Emissions Targets Initiative and Senior Program Officer for the Science-Based Targets Platform. So, Lila, welcome. Can you hear us here in Brussels? And first of all, can we hear you? Yeah, it was inevitable, wasn't it? This is one of those things. Okay, we'll wait for Lila to come back on track. Lila, can you hear us now? It appears you're on mute.
Yes, she is.
Yep, can you just unmute your connection? Lila? No, we don't hear you, Lila, I'm afraid.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Okay.
It works?
Yes, we're good. Don't touch anything else. Okay, great. Moderator's worst nightmare. Anyway, we're delighted to have you with us, Lila, and sorry that you can't join us in Brussels in person.
Excellent.
But we wanted to kick things off, right? We're going to talk about various aspects of the SDGs, the geopolitics around sustainable development, building a little on some of the conversations in the previous session. But we want to start with you, Lila, and give us a little bit of a stock take, right? Sort of a UN perspective on where we are regarding the SDGs. I see you looking disturbingly static,
Yep.
So hopefully you're still connected with us.
I know. I see the video keeps.
Uh-oh.
I think she's done that herself, actually.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Lila, but you're still on mute.
New York.
Okay, I don't know. Vanessa, you try and get her. Okay. All right. So apparently Lila's connection is a little unstable, but we'll do what we can. Lila, can you hear us now? Yep, but we can't hear you.
Hear you. Does it work?
Yes.
Yep, that's better. All right, we'll keep our fingers crossed. Lila, we're giving you the first few minutes to give us a quick stock take on where we are with the UN agenda.
So hopefully this is gonna stick and you can hear me now. Yep.
Okay. No. Okay, so we'll just wrap up the session. The UN's very positive about the.
This is too much. Can I take off my video?
Yeah, let's try that. Okay.
Okay, I'll try now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly. Okay, I think that might be the bandwidth problem resolved. Let's keep our fingers crossed. All right, so Lila, we'd asked you to just take the first few minutes to give us a quick sense of the UN perspectives about where we are, the problems and the barriers that the SDGs are facing, and how we can get back on track, and what you think the role of science and technology is within that wider context, if you're still with us.
All right.
Okay?
I'm still with you. The SDG agenda is actually in crisis, as you've mentioned. There.
Lila?
2030. Oh boy, this is hard.
Okay, Vanessa, I don't know if it's possible to ask Lila to reconnect with her phone or something similar.
Yes, I will.
Okay, Lila, let's try one more time. No? Okay, well then, in that context, I suggest we switch track until we have Lila back with us, which hopefully will be in the next few minutes. So, we were going to take stock, get some thoughts from the UN. Hopefully we'll get those in a couple of minutes. But the first question to you as a panel was going to be your perspectives on where we are. I mean, you're all involved in SDG-related activities in different ways. Takao, you were the national lead for the Japanese task force on the implementation of the SDGs. Márcia, through RELX and also the UN Global Compact Network in the UK. And Linda, Trinity College, deeply committed to the SDGs in various ways. Where do you think we are? What do we need to get back on track? So, Takao, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, can you hear me?
Yes, if you keep talking, then they pick up on the microphone.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for giving me this great opportunity to be here. And well, this is a very important topics, and I think the one of challenges for us is how to make a bridge between macro layer social landscape such as SDGs and micro layer individual research activities. And I think the creating innovation ecosystem which is consisted of various stakeholders, including research committees, is key to achieve SDGs. And well, thanks to the UN interagency task team, they provided guidebook for SDI for SDGs roadmaps. I think that is help us to facilitate communication among the stakeholders. We also learned from the some lessons from the, say, making vaccines for COVID-19. I think that flexible convergence of scientific knowledge is key for the innovation or achieve the kind of change for our daily life. And so anyway, well, we need to shape a pathway to the goals which show systematic approach to solve complex problems, including many, not only science and technology, but also rules and regulations and, say, finance and so forth. So, and we need to develop such roadmaps at global level and national level and, local level. And let me make 3 points. And first, I think the matching of societal issues and scientific research question is very important. And so, well, year 2030 comes soon. right? And but necessary knowledge may be produced not only by the short-term research project, but also by research activities beyond, the 2030 time frame. The secondly, management of this kind of project is also very, very challenging, in my opinion. We believe the collective knowledge, not only science and technological matters, but also, again, business models or rules or regulations, local systems, and so forth. So who can lead such complex project, and how he or she could be supported? I think in order to drive such a complex project, a role of experts who can build a bridge among stakeholders are quite important, in my opinion. And concerning, well, again, a bit different, but concerning the incentives for the university, especially university researchers, well, this is maybe in case of Japan, but universities' research system still seems to have a kind of publish or perish culture, or citation index is very important for them. So I think now that time to reshape our evaluation system. That's my second point. And lastly, but not least, under current geopolitical situation, I think that we need to pay attention to maintain a sound environment where converging knowledge beyond the borders can be encouraged. I would like to emphasize that importance of securing and improving environment where researchers can play an active role beyond borders based on shared value in terms of research integrity and security. That's my...
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you
okay,
very much.
So now, Márcia, you get the unenviable hat of speaking on behalf of the UN, given that you are the chair, or at least one of the founders of the UN Global Compact Network in the UK. And for those who perhaps aren't aware, the Global Compact is the industry platform for driving progress towards Sustainable Development Goals and Millennium Development Goals before then. So give us an industry take from your perspective, Márcia. What do we need to do to get back on track? Where do companies see the priorities? What can be done about it?
Yeah, so I'm here wearing then two hats. As you pointed out, I am the chair of the UN Global Compact in the United Kingdom, but I also serve on the board of the Foundation for the Global Compact, which is helping to underwrite the initiative. It is focused on 10 principles related to human rights, labor, environment, of course, and anti-corruption. But what it does is the largest movement of companies and other members of civil society to come together to make an impact on the SDGs. And I think that there is a very good opportunity for businesses to look at collaborating to scale. And I think that the essence of this, representing a corporate perspective, so I'm Chief Sustainability Officer for RELX, and we are very proud of Elsevier, which is one of our operating businesses, which has a deep commitment to science and innovation, improving health outcomes. It's what we call part of our unique contributions as a business. And I think it's fundamental for us, as it is for other companies, to look at where your expertise lies, not put a label over what you're already doing and saying, oh, right, we do this, this, and this, and that maps to the SDGs. But you need to do that as a starting point to figure out where you can have your impact, but then how do you scale that? And that's what we encourage within the Global Compact companies to do, and to provide the tools that can assist them in doing that. Something that we launched in, well, actually, if we take a step back, the SDGs were unanimously adopted by every state of the UN in September of 2015. My colleagues at Elsevier and a few of us in central functions were actually at one UN Plaza when this was happening, and we released a free piece of research, not knowing all the ins and outs of what the SDGs would become, but we were trying to see how how ready science was to support this agenda. And one of the outcomes, and we asked Richard Horton, the editor of The Lancet, to present those findings, was the idea that as we looked within ourselves to do that exercise that I've just mentioned, where does our expertise lie? How can we scale that impact? We ended up launching in 2017 something called the RELX SDG Resource Center. And this is a free tool for the world. So we know that across all 17 SDGs, we've got content. We might have a tool or an event because we have Reed Exhibitions, which is one of the world's largest exhibitions businesses. We might have legal content that's related. If you visit the homepage, you'll see the SDG News Tracker, which is going over tens of thousands of news sources and making news up to the minute in every UN language plus German available if you have a particular query or you just want to see what's coming up, or you can also search by geography. It's an example of figuring out what we need to do to scale our impact, and we have made a commitment to this. And if you're going to make a commitment and you're a company, where does that get driven home? And I think that's in the money. So if you look in our annual report, which is coming out later this month, you'll see that my CEO and my Chief Financial Officer both have targets that are related to the RELX SDG Resource Center. And in closing, to cede the floor, let me just also say that, again, it's bringing it back to the money. Last year, for the first time, we linked up these KPIs related to the SDG Resource Center to a financial instrument of the company. So we went out to a consortium, about 20 banks, and said, we need to renew our revolving credit facility. One of these KPIs we'd like to suggest is on our own environmental performance, our carbon reduction commitment, and then 2 will be related to the SDG Resource Center. If we don't make those KPIs and it's over a 5-year period, we get penalized. If we do make them, then we'll get a reduction. So I think it's figuring out what you do and you do well, how you scale that, making sure that you're going to embed that commitment.
Okay, super. Thank you, Márcia. All right, Linda. So we had a very fruitful conversation before the conference about how the world of science itself, universities, leading research organizations, try to absorb the SDGs into strategy, mission, etc. So what's your take? Where can you contribute most or most effectively in the years to come?
So I suppose through sitting here today and listening to things, I have a more stark view even than when we were speaking. So I think it's impossible that the goals will be achieved at all. And I think when you read the reports, when you look at the damage that's been caused over COVID and Ukraine war, etc., and the step back, they will not, in my opinion, be achieved by 2030 or anywhere near it. And I was thinking, and I've been reflecting today, I was thinking about my own country. So if you look at Ireland, we're a country that supposedly is helping keep Europe out of recession. Yet we have the largest number of homeless people that we ever had. We have, like every other country, huge increases in gender-based violence over COVID. We have nowhere for people to live. And we have no ability, I feel, or political will to sort that out for ourselves. So when I stand back and look at the SDGs more globally, I say to myself, well, how in God's name are we going to help for others? So I would say that one of the roles of university is about that speaking of truth. And I've been racking my brains myself because we do a lot of, we build SDGs into our research. We have fantastic collaborations with other people around the world. Europe is really moving on researcher assessment. There's a new research assessment framework where you can build in other things, not just citations. And we might not have embraced it fully yet, but we have the building blocks. But ultimately, when I stand back from it, what I see is that the world is broken. The economic model that we have is not viable to get the SDGs solved. And perhaps the only thing a university can do is offer alternative futures. And it's very hard to offer an alternative future because you're stuck in a system which has a particular financial model. So I'm trying to find a way that we can lift ourselves out of that and say what that alternative future should be. And for me, it's very connected. I was actually motivated earlier from Peter and I was saying Destination Earth. But for me, it's very connected to looking at things where you say things that the GDP growth curve, it's over, and you need to start to look at alternative ways of looking at things. And for me, I'm very interested in the donut economics, the social foundation, the ecological ceiling, how you live between it. And could we, in our university, begin to live a different way so that at least you can offer an alternative future? Now, I'm not saying that's easy, and I'm not saying I can bring people along with me, but I think it's about saying there's radically contesting the conventional wisdom by which we're all living with, because we are otherwise doing more of the same old stuff in a world where there's dominant vested interest for the SDGs not to be solved. That would be my overall take on it.
Okay, thank you also for the candor, as always. Let's do a quick show of hands. Right? Linda thinks we're not going to get close to the SDGs. How many people here are more optimistic? Either to meet or to get close to attaining the SDGs in the next 8 years? Show of hands. Anyone?
Is there any optimistic person in the audience?
Thank goodness. Helene Meyer from Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences is the only member of the audience who thinks we might get close.
I am naturally an optimistic person, so I hate even saying this, but I'm glad you're optimistic.
Okay. All right, well, let's keep this a little bit in sort of the geopolitical context. We've talked a lot about this today, about the big shifts in the world, the power blocks, regional differentiation. We have a global framework which was agreed in more open times. Right? It's only 7-8 years ago, but the world was different. And I think there was a greater spirit of cooperation. So in a world that's becoming increasingly divided, more polarized, is a global approach still appropriate? Should we be thinking about this in more national, regional, or localized contexts? And the targets remain something more esoteric, but the principles are something that you apply at a national level in Japan or within a company or within a university, and then you see what you can achieve. What are your thoughts on this? Do we still need a global framework when the world is increasingly divided?
I'd say absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was even the open world when the SDGs were agreed unanimously. So, but SDGs is a kind of, how to say in English, but very macro layers, landscape of the society, and how to achieve the goal is up to each nation. So again, actions should be needed at the local level, national level, and global level. So I think that we need to have a common framework that make easier to communicate to each other. I think that I agree with that.
So a single language and reference point, no matter what kind of organization you're running. Márcia, Linda, do you agree with that?
I would take, do you want to?
Go ahead.
So I thought the panel that we just had was really, really interesting about those global tensions. And I do see it as an opportunity for us to realize that the global south has to play a huge role, and for Europe to shift its perspective more. And I mean, even if you want to do that on a completely selfish perspective, if you look at the 4 pillars that were discussed earlier, and talent and skills, and look where the largest populations in the world are, it's a natural thing to focus on Asia and focus on Africa. And maybe that is something good that might come out of the common tension. But the second thing I will add, there is no distinction between the local and global action. And I think this is a really key thing when you look at some of the very interesting frameworks about sustainability. So what you do locally has global consequence. So when I do something locally and don't live within my ecological ceiling, I wreck the ceiling for you in Japan. What I do locally in terms of caring about the well-being of people I work with or not caring about them impacts the well-being of people around the world. So for me, it's 2 things. It's first of all linking that local and global and making people deeply understand that. And secondly, it's actually continuing to build the fantastic kind of collaborations that the EU naturally does, but perhaps focus on Asia and Africa much, much, much more.
Yeah, I think that, as my colleagues have said, it's important to set out what your aspirations are. If you aim for here, you might come below here. If you're aiming up here, you may not make it, but hopefully you're going to get closer. But there is an interesting tension that we're discussing here between local and global and national. And if you look at what we're doing, say, within the UN Global Compact in the UK, we have a report that we put out called Measuring Up. We did it 2 years ago. We just did it again last year. And it's focused on the United Kingdom, trying to hold the feet of power to account for what has been committed and what is actually being done. I think that's really critical. But to your point on Africa, we at Elsevier put out a free piece of research, which you can find on the RELX SDG Resource Center, on pathways to net zero. But we've been doing a lot of work around this between the global north and the global south divide. And only if you exclude the two big powerhouses of China and India, only about a fifth of publications on the SDGs are coming from the global south. Yet, if you look at global south-south collaboration, it's really high. It's averaging around 20% versus somewhere between 11 and 16% for the global north. So there's a lot of great innovation that can happen. We just need to make sure that we're creating those opportunities for that research, in this case, to come out and to be heard, and making sure that those voices have a chance to be read alongside the rest.
Thank you, Márcia. So it brings to mind a couple of related questions for me. I mean, obviously the SDGs are a key part of the assessment criteria for Horizon Europe, right? But a lot of the research being done through Horizon Europe is for European purposes, whereas for the SDGs, we know that the vast majority of the measurable impacts need to happen in emerging and developing markets for these global goals to be achieved. So I guess one question is, what responsibility do we have in the global north or in the wealthier, more mature R&D nations to support capacity building and knowledge transfer? And what else can be done? I mean, your resource center is fascinating. Right? Around one of the SDGs, I think access to clean water, 1% of the cited research is coming from institutions in the global south. So is there a responsibility in the north build more capacity in the south for research to be driving the solutions for SDGs in a local context? How could that be done?
If I just jump in, because I feel very strongly about this, yes and yes and yes. So Elsevier for many years has been a critical partner for something called Research for Life. And what that does is it enables researchers at universities, libraries, hospitals to gain access to our Science Direct product for free or low cost if the nation can afford that. There were over 1 million article downloads in 2022, as there were in previous years. We're also working on training through Research for Life. It's a program administered with the World Health Organization, but it involves other UN partners as well, and many, many other publishers, well over 30 different publishers and more who are contributing to Research for Life. So yes, we need to be ensuring that we're doing that. And maybe just one other example, because you mentioned clean water. We started maybe 11 years ago something called the RELX Environmental Challenge. So somebody once said when we changed our corporate name in 2015 from Marie Elsevier to RELX, that we went from a company that not many people had heard of on a consumer basis when we changed to RELX, one that no one had ever heard of. But what we decided to do is to do something under that corporate name focused on water. So we've had recipients in both the developed world and in the developing economies as well, but the projects all need to have local involvement. They need to be technologies that can scale, and it's a relatively small contribution that we're making. It's a $50,000 first prize and a $25,000 second prize. But when you look over this long scale of being committed, not just for today, not just for last year, but over a longer period, and create this alumni network, it can create an opportunity for people to get to know each other and hopefully to be encouraging, using it as a way for recipients to leverage, see, I've gotten some funding for this, it really is viable, let me show you, and then going to get more funding over time.
Great. Now, I'm going to ask Takao and Linda to respond to that, but then I'm going to turn to the floor. So if you want to start thinking about any comments or questions, it'll be over to you in a couple of minutes. Takao,
Yes.
if we put this... Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you.
No.
the national context, I mean, you were in charge of the task force in Japan for implementing the SDGs. And did this question of technology transfer to other parts of the world or capacity building in other parts of the world, was that part of the broader discussions about how to do this, particularly through the JST funding programs and models, or is this something that remained very much in a national conversation?
Thank you. Well, JST is supporting a kind of basic research, so it's not doing a big business in terms of technology transfer, but I think the human resources factor is very, very important, not only south but also north too. So therefore, facilitating the research collaboration with developing countries, that's a very important part. But again, when at the research corporation level, we can doing good, but again, in order to deploy the result of research in their country, that really needs more, or different knowledge, like a business models, or financial support, or so. So we need a more collective effort to realize, social transformation there. So I think again, perhaps again, as I mentioned very earlier, I think there's kind of collaborative programs beyond simply research projects is quite key at this moment.
Great, thank you. Okay, Linda?
So I suppose I would think of that question that you're asking a little bit differently in the sense that I think we're assuming that the European way is, we know the answer in terms of kind of transferring and in terms of capacity building in a particular way. So we have a Centre for Environmental Humanities in Trinity, and I've learned an awful lot through it. And one of the things it does is it questions a Western perspective on everything to do with sustainability, and it makes you think differently about where kind of, I suppose, answers come from. And I had many years ago, I had a person who did a PhD with me called Radical Plumbers and Clay Pumps. I thought it was a great name, an interesting name for a PhD title, but it was really essentially looking at technology for water in Africa, in technology that was imposed on a particular country and technology that came from that country itself. And you can guess the end of the story and what happened in it. But ultimately, and if you look at those movements like Design for the Other 90%, where we in a small portion of the world, designed for 90% of the rest of the world, I think there's an awful lot of things that need to be contested in the way you phrase the question. I don't, just in how we think about it, and what capacity building means when you think about it on a kind of much more equal footing and information flowing in both directions. So I would say that to it.
Wonderful. Okay. Let's see if we have any hands. Okay, we have a first one here, then Robert Jan in the front row. So let's take these two first, and then we'll come to you in just a moment.
Thank you. Elena Krastilova again, the University of Warwick Institute of Global Sustainable Development. My question is to Linda, if I may, please. As an academic to an academic, I would like actually to fully support and comment on what you've said about the local. There is nothing global without the local, especially in the world we live in today, complex, VUCA world, and where all global problems can only be seen through the local. But I was very intrigued also by your commentary on alternative futures. Okay, so we at Warwick do massive amount of research on sustainable development and also putting it to practice. So how can we lead by example in terms of these alternative futures, especially in the academic sector where we have a bit more freedom? So perhaps if you can comment on that. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll hold that question. Yep. Let's hear now from Robert Jan in the front row, and then we have a third question over here, and then we'll turn to the panel for the answers. Okay?
It's Eindhoven University of Technology. My question is very much specific to Márcia. I think it's great that the RELX group has appointed you as sustainability ambassador and all the plans you do in the awards. But the biggest contribution your company can give to sustainable development goals is, of course, to go open access fully and not to lock publications behind paywalls. Now, I see with your new CEO, Comstal Benefit, an enormous change, and I admire her for her leadership to go into open science, open access. But can you just confirm yourself that it also will help you if open access becomes the norm at Elsevier for doing your work in the field of sustainability?
Okay, great question. Thank you, Robert Jan. Now we'll take a third one over here, and then we'll get some answers from the panel.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel Gardon, I'm the director of the Coimbra Group of Universities. So we've talked about the role of academia, the role of industrial research and innovation. But I very much appreciated, Linda, that you also put into question the role of academia. So what about citizen science also, because UN SDGs is a common effort of all parts of society. What about the role of citizen science in achieving the UN SDGs? Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that question. I think that's also quite relevant in the JST context, science communication, citizen engagement. So let's perhaps, Linda, you take alternative futures. Márcia, you have the question on Elsevier. And Takao, if you start with a response on citizen science, citizen engagement, and then let's see where we get to.
Okay, so thank you for the question. It's really interesting. And what I would say is I don't know the exact answer, but I know I am trying to navigate a path. And one of the ways that I'm finding that I want to navigate that path is through how we live our lives in the university. So for example, when you think about how we operate financially, and I think it's really important to talk about finance, we do your very typical kind of accounts at the end of the year. And for me, I want to move way beyond that, where we look at the natural capital, the social capital, the intellectual capital, if you even like using the word capital in that context, and that be embodied in every part of what we do. So when we actually are expanding our campus in the future, that we think about that in the round. And the only way to think of all of those things is to connect the actions you're doing locally and globally at the same time, because you know the biodiversity loss you cause or encourage through all of your work gets fed into that. Likewise, your carbon footprint gets fed into it. So that's one way. So I'm not saying that that's radical enough, but I certainly think that it's a way of actually doing something. And I would add another thing that kind of goes to the third question as well. We haven't, today I think we haven't actually talked about the class gap. And while in universities, I think we're all doing a much better job in terms of access, I think there's a huge step further that we can go. And whether you're talking about citizen science or whether you're talking about, there's a group, some parts where Trinity is based in some of the communities, we're working with the last thing on their mind is sustainability, because they can't eat. So it's to think about the things in the round, I think, and think about who gets to be in the university as part of that kind of journey as well, and pushing it much, much, much further than we do now, whether you're talking about national or international students, in fact.
Great, thank you. I hope that answers your question, Elena. Now, Márcia, But you didn't see this
nice,
one coming.
Easy,
Yeah,
nice,
exactly.
easy question. Well, I think the first thing to say is that I haven't just recently been appointed, because actually I've been with my company for over 15 years in the same job. It's just been called something different over time. So we have a really long-standing commitment to sustainability, corporate responsibility, ESG, or any other term that you want to put on this, which is how do we do what we do? How do we minimize any negative impact of conducting our business? How do we maximize that positive impact? You mentioned the CEO of Elsevier, Kumsal Bayezid. We're very happy that Kumsal, who's risen up with our business in different roles, came to become the chief executive. And I think what Kumsal has brought, because this is how she is as a leader, is humility. We are here to serve our customers. You have the answers. We are just trying to enable them. I think that we tend to be agnostic about the delivery mechanism. We're about, in Elsevier, producing world-leading knowledge that can help our customers. And they are telling us how they want to have that science delivered. So if they're some type of institution and they feel that one model is preferable to them versus another. But you asked me specifically, how would it affect me? So I am very delighted that we do have a huge amount of open access content. And at the Resource Center, we have been increasing the amount of content. That's one of our goals year on year, because we are committed to keep the Resource Center going at least to 2030, which is the deadline for the SDGs. But we are hoping to create a pathway so that all that SDG content, because we invite open sourcing of ideas around pieces of content and how they map to the SDGs. So you can do that on the Resource Center, so we can improve our keywords that will then help us to make sure that the right content is flowing into the Resource Center. So what we want is to get all of that relevant content onto the Resource Center, which we hope to do. So as our open access content comes, it will automatically go onto the Resource Center. That will bump us up, exponentially. So I hope that that's going to come. But this is a good dialogue to have. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I know that I and my colleagues are very open to having those conversations.
Great, thank you, Márcia. So Takao, you have the final word. 2 minutes.
Well, citizen science, I think that's a very important part in terms of, the getting public, trust towards the science community. And we GST has a small program to support that kind of activities. But to be honest, I think our science community is still, they don't really, familiar with the science, citizen science at this moment. So again, it may, we need to change our, evaluation systems and so far. So I think that's a great challenge, I believe, in my opinion. But again, that's a very, very important point.
Great, thank you very much. So we're just about on time, but sadly, it's time for us to wrap up. So I'm going to hand back in a moment to Marie-Line. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank Linda, Márcia, and Takao. Takao in particular for flying all the way from Tokyo to be with us.
Thank you.
But thank you for joining. Thank you. And we will continue these conversations in future events, I have no doubt.